He was a good man, loved by everyone here today. We will miss his kindness and his laugh.
I was still holding Daniel's photograph when the child stepped in front of me. The funeral had been quiet, too quiet for a man who had spent his life surrounded by powerful people. No one cried, no one lingered. And then, out of nowhere, a boy no older than 10 looked up at me with eyes that didn't belong at a funeral. "Mrs. Powell," he said softly, placing a familiar object into my trembling hands. It was Daniel's fountain pen. My breath caught. "I told me to give this to you, if something happened." Before I could ask a single question, the boy turned and disappeared into the crowd that suddenly felt like strangers. And in that moment, I knew my husband hadn't just died. If this moment unsettled you the way it unsettled me, stay with me. I need to tell this story the only way I can, honestly. And maybe as you listen, tell me where you're watching from and what you would have done in my place. I read every comment, especially the ones that remind me I'm not alone. I didn't realize I was gripping the pen too tightly until my fingers started to ache. The cemetery had begun to empty out behind me, black coats drifting away like shadows retreating at dusk. People offered their polite condolences, their distant nods, their careful avoidance of eye contact. Daniel had known so many people. Important people. Influential people. And yet, in the end, they all seemed eager to leave him behind. I stood there alone, except for the weight of that pen in my palm. Daniel's fountain pen. It was dark navy with the thin silver clip slightly worn at the edges. I had seen it 1,000 times, resting in his breast pocket, tapping lightly against legal pads, gliding across documents late into the night. He never let anyone touch it, not even me. "It's just a habit," he used to say with a small smile. Every lawyer has one thing they're superstitious about. But now, holding it in my hand, I knew that wasn't true. This wasn't superstition. This was something else, something deliberate, something hidden. My heart began to pound, not from grief this time, but from something colder, something sharper. I looked around quickly, scanning the remaining faces, searching for the boy. Ethan. That's what he had said his name was. But he was gone. Vanished so completely, it was as if he had never been there at all. A chill slid down my spine. I didn't belong here anymore. Not at the graveside, not among Daniel's colleagues, not in this quiet, suffocating version of reality where nothing made sense. I turned and walked toward my car, the gravel crunching under my heels louder than it should have been. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light stretched too long. Every passing car felt like it was watching me. I kept glancing at the passenger seat where the pen lay as if it might move on its own. "Don't trust anyone from Langford and Pierce." The words hadn't been written yet, but somehow I could feel them coming. That sense, the one you get when you know something is wrong before you even understand what it is. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had shifted to a dull gray. The house looked exactly the same. Quiet. Still. Ordinary. But it didn't feel like home anymore. I stepped inside slowly. The silence hit me first. No footsteps. No distant hum of Daniel's voice on a call. No faint tapping of that pen against his desk. Just absence. Heavy and absolute. I set my purse down, then carefully placed the pen on the kitchen counter. For a moment, I simply stared at it. "What did you do, Daniel?" I whispered. My voice sounded unfamiliar in the empty room. I reached for the pen again, this time more cautiously. Turning it in my fingers, I examined it closely. The barrel felt slightly heavier than I remembered. That was the first thing. Then I noticed the seam, a thin, almost invisible line running along the middle of the pen, so subtle I had never paid attention to it before. My breath caught. No. My fingers trembled as I twisted it gently. At first, nothing happened. Then, with the faintest click, it shifted. The pen wasn't just a pen. It unscrewed. A cold wave of realization washed over me. Daniel had hidden something inside this. My heart began to race. Slowly, carefully, I separated the two halves. For a second, I saw nothing. Then, a tightly rolled piece of paper slid out, landing softly against my palm. I froze. Everything in me told me to stop, to put it back, to pretend I had never opened it, because whatever was written on that piece of paper would change everything. But I had already come too far. I unrolled it with unsteady hands. The handwriting was Daniel's. I would have recognized it anywhere. Precise, controlled, slightly slanted to the right. But the words themselves, they didn't belong to the man I thought I knew. Don't trust anyone from Langford and Pierce. My breath hitched. I read it again and again, as if the meaning might somehow change. It didn't. A strange ringing filled my ears. Langford and Pierce, Daniel's firm, the place he had dedicated decades of his life to, the place he had defended, respected, even loved, in his own quiet way. Don't trust anyone. I felt my knees weaken slightly, and I reached for the edge of the counter to steady myself. This didn't make sense. None of it did. If Daniel didn't trust them, then why had he stayed? Why had he never said anything? Why had he... A memory surfaced, sharp and sudden. 3 weeks ago, late at night, Daniel sitting at the dining table, files spread out around him. His tie loosened, his expression tense. I had walked in half asleep. "Then it's past midnight," I had said gently. "Come to bed." He hadn't looked up right away. "I will," he replied, distracted. "Just a few more things." I remember watching him for a moment. There had been something in his eyes, something I hadn't recognized at the time. Fear. Real, quiet fear. And when I stepped closer, he had quickly flipped one of the folders closed. Too quickly. "What's that?" I had asked. "Nothing important," he said immediately. Too quickly. I should have pushed. I should have asked more questions. But I didn't, because that's what you do after 40 years of marriage. You trust the silences as much as the words. Now, standing alone in my kitchen, I realized just how dangerous that trust had been. My hands tightened around the note. "Don't trust anyone." A sudden sound made me jump. The phone. It rang sharply, cutting through the silence like a blade. I stared at it for a second, my heart pounding. Then it rang again and again. Something inside me hesitated. Then I walked toward it slowly. The screen lit up with an unknown number. Of course it was. I swallowed hard before answering. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a voice. Low, male, controlled. "Mrs. Powell." My stomach dropped. "Yes, we heard about Daniel. I'm calling on behalf of Langford and Pierce." My grip tightened around the phone. "I see," I said carefully. "We'd like to meet with you. There are matters that need to be addressed. Documents, assets, Things Daniel left behind. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. Not sympathy, not concern, control. "We can send someone over this evening," he continued. "It's important we handle this quickly." Quickly. Too quickly. My eyes drifted down to the note still clutched in my other hand. "Don't trust anyone." A slow, cold clarity settled over me. "I don't think tonight is a good time," I said. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then it would be in your best interest, Mrs. Powell. Not a suggestion. A warning. My heart began to pound harder. "I'll contact you when I'm ready," I replied, forcing calm into my voice. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the line went dead. I stood there staring at the phone long after the call had ended. The house didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt watched. I turned slowly, my gaze drifting toward the front window. For a split second, I thought I saw someone standing across the street. A figure. Watching. But when I stepped closer, there was nothing there. Just an empty sidewalk. Still, the feeling didn't go away. I looked down at the pen again, at the note, at the life I thought I had, and I realized something that made my chest tighten with fear. Daniel hadn't left me a memory. He had left me a warning, and whatever he had been trying to protect, it wasn't over yet. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel sitting at the table, his shoulders tense, his jaw tight, that pen moving across paper like it was the only thing holding him together. I kept replaying the moments I had ignored, the signs I had dismissed. 40 years of marriage, and somehow I had missed the most important chapter of his life. Or maybe he had hidden it from me on purpose. That thought settled heavily in my chest. Morning came without relief. The house felt colder than usual, even though the thermostat hadn't changed. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and stood in the kitchen staring at Daniel's chair. Empty. It would always be empty now. I forced myself to move. If Daniel had left me that note, then he wanted me to see something, understand something. "Don't trust anyone," from Langford and Pierce. The words echoed in my mind as I picked up my phone. I hadn't touched Daniel's belongings yet. Not really. Everything was still where he had left it. His office, his files, his laptop, his phone. I hesitated before walking down the hallway. His office door was slightly ajar, just as it had been the last night I saw him alive. I pushed it open slowly. The scent hit me first, paper ink, and that faint cologne he had worn for years. Familiar. Comforting. Painful. His desk was still cluttered with folders neatly stacked, but clearly in use. A legal pad sat in the center filled with notes I couldn't yet bring myself to read. And there it was, his phone, face down, untouched since the day he died. My heart began to race again. "Okay, Charlotte," I whispered to myself. "Just look." I picked it up. The screen lit up. Locked. Of course it was. Daniel had always been careful. Private, but not secretive. At least that's what I had believed. I tried his usual passcode, our anniversary. Nothing. I tried his birthday. Still nothing. A strange unease crept in. Why would he change it? Then I remembered something small, so small, I almost dismissed it. 3 weeks ago, I had walked into the room while he was unlocking his phone. He had turned slightly away, just enough to block my view. At the time, I had smiled. "Still guarding your secrets?" I had teased. He hadn't smiled back. "Just habit," he said. But it hadn't felt like a habit. It had felt like fear. I stared at the screen again. Think. What mattered to Daniel? Not dates, not numbers. Words. Always words. My fingers hovered over the keypad. Then I typed Powell. Nothing. I exhaled slowly. Okay, think harder. Another memory surfaced. The pen. He had always said it was more than just a pen. My lucky charm, he once called it. I typed P-E-N, wrong. Frustration tightened in my chest. Then almost instinctively, I whispered it out loud. What would you protect, Daniel? And the answer came immediately. Not himself. Not his work. People. Always people. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them and typed P-R-O-T-E. The phone unlocked. A sharp breath escaped my lips. Daniel. I didn't know whether to feel relief or dread. Probably both. The home screen appeared normal at first glance. Emails, calendar, messages. Everything looked ordinary, but I knew better now. I went straight to the call log, or what was left of it. My stomach dropped. Half of it was missing. Entire days gone. Erased. Why would you delete your calls? I whispered. Unless they weren't meant to be found. My hands trembled slightly as I moved to his messages. Most of them were routine. Work updates, client communications. Nothing unusual, until I saw a thread with no name. Just a number. I opened it. The messages were short, fragmented. Did you get it? Yes. They're watching. I know. Then you shouldn't be doing this, Dan. My breath caught. Dan. Not Daniel. Not Mr. Powell. Someone who knew him well enough to drop the formality. The last message was from Daniel. I can't ignore this. Not after what they did. My heart began to pound louder. What they did? What had they done? I scrolled further, but there was nothing else. No name, no explanation. Just fragments. Pieces of something much bigger. I set the phone down slowly, my mind racing. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was proof. Daniel had been involved in something dangerous. Something serious enough to hide. Something serious enough to get him killed. The thought hit me like a wave. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, they said it was his heart. They said... But the words sounded hollow now. Too clean. Too convenient. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to steady the growing storm inside me. Think. Think clearly. The note. The messages. The missing calls. And then, another memory. This one sharper than the rest. A week before he died. Daniel had come home late. Later than usual. He looked different. Not just tired. Haunted. I had followed him into the kitchen. You're working too hard, I told him gently. This isn't like you. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked to the counter, set down his briefcase, and just stood there, staring at nothing. Dan, I pressed. Finally, he looked at me, and for a split second, I saw it. Fear. Real fear. If anything ever happens to me, he started. My stomach tightened. Don't say that, I interrupted immediately. You're fine. He hesitated, then forced a small smile. You're right. I'm just tired. And just like that, the moment passed. Or at least, I let it pass. Now, standing in his office, I felt the weight of that moment crushing me. He had tried to tell me, and I had shut him down. A tear slipped down my cheek. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I should have listened." Silence answered me, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt charged, like something was waiting. I wiped my face quickly and turned back to the desk. If Daniel had hidden things in his phone, then there had to be more. My eyes scanned the room, the shelves, the drawers, the files. Then they landed on the legal pad, the one sitting right in the center. I stepped closer. The top page was filled with notes, names, numbers, arrows connecting them. It didn't look like legal work. It looked like a map, a web, and at the center of it, one name stood out. V. Langford. My breath caught. Victor Langford. Daniel's partner. The man who had called me. The man who wanted to come over tonight. A cold wave of realization washed over me. Don't trust anyone from Langford and Pierce. My hands began to shake. Daniel, what did you uncover? And more importantly, how far had it gone? I stared at the name again, my heart pounding louder with every second. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. Far enough to get him killed. I didn't remember leaving the house. One moment, I was standing in Daniel's office staring at Victor Langford's name scribbled at the center of that tangled web of notes. And the next, I was driving back to the cemetery. I told myself I needed air. But that wasn't the truth. I needed answers. And right now, the only thread I had was that boy, Ethan. The sky had turned overcast, the kind of dull gray that made everything feel quieter than it should. The cemetery gates creaked as I pushed them open, the sound echoing far too loudly in the stillness. "Hello," I called out instinctively, my voice small against the empty rows of headstones. No answer. Of course not. What had I expected? That he would just be waiting there for me? Still, I walked deeper in my eyes, scanning every corner, every path. The crowd from the funeral was long gone now. No black coats, no murmured condolences, just silence and the faint rustling of leaves. I made my way back to Daniel's grave. Fresh dirt, a single arrangement of white lilies left behind by someone who hadn't signed their name. I stared at it for a moment. "Was that you?" I whispered, thinking of the boy. But something else pulled at my attention. A feeling, that same one I had felt earlier. The one that made the back of my neck prickle. I wasn't alone. Slowly I turned, and that's when I saw her, standing about 20 feet away, partially hidden behind a tall oak tree. A woman, mid-60s maybe. Tall, composed, dressed in a dark coat that didn't quite match the casual stillness of the place. She wasn't pretending to be there for a grave. She was watching me. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I took a step forward. "Excuse me," I called out. She turned immediately, too quickly, and began walking away. "Wait," I tried again, my voice sharper this time. But she didn't stop. If anything, she moved faster. Something inside me snapped. I followed. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I hurried after her, weaving between rows of headstones, my breath quickening with each step. "Ma'am, please." She reached the path near the gate. Just a few more steps, and she would be gone. "Did you know my husband?" I called out. "That did it." She stopped. "Not completely. Just enough." Her shoulders stiffened. Then slowly, she turned back. Her expression wasn't afraid. It wasn't guilty either. It was something else. Measured, careful. "You shouldn't be here alone," she said. Her voice was calm, low, controlled. It unsettled me more than anger would have. I was at my husband's funeral, I replied, trying to steady my breath. I think I have every right to be here. Her eyes studied me. Sharp, assessing. Yes, she said after a moment. You do. A pause stretched between. Then I took another step closer. You were watching me, I said. It wasn't a question. She didn't deny it. I needed to be sure, she replied. Sure of what? That you were alone. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Why would that matter? Her gaze flickered briefly toward the road, then back to me. Because if you weren't, she said quietly, I wouldn't have approached you. My pulse quickened. Approached me? You were leaving. I was leaving because you called out, she corrected gently. That changes things. Nothing about this conversation made sense. And yet, every word felt intentional, carefully chosen. Who are you? I asked. She hesitated, for the first time. Then Margaret Cole. The name didn't immediately register, but something about it felt familiar. I worked with Daniel, she added. My breath caught. Worked with him where Langford and Pierce. The words hit me like a jolt. My fingers instinctively tightened around the pen in my coat pocket. Don't trust anyone from Langford and Pierce. I took a small step back. Her eyes noticed. Of course they did. Whatever he told you, she said calmly, you're right to be cautious. That stopped me. You don't even know what he told me. I know, Daniel, she replied. There was something in her tone. Not arrogance, not assumption, certainty. And I know what kind of man he was when he believed something wasn't right. A flicker of emotion crossed her face, quick but real. Grief, that caught me off guard. You cared about him, I said quietly. She didn't answer right away. Then softly, I was one of the few people left in that firm who still remembered why we became lawyers in the first place. The weight of her words settled heavily between us. Then why were you hiding? I pressed. Her expression hardened slightly. Because I don't know who's watching you, she said. And until now, I didn't know if I could trust you either. That stung. I'm his wife. Yes, she said, which makes you either his greatest ally or his biggest liability. The words hit harder than I expected. I'm not accusing you, she interrupted gently. I'm being realistic. Silence fell again. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves overhead. You saw the boy, didn't you? She asked suddenly. My heart skipped. Yes. What did he give you? I hesitated. Every instinct told me to keep it to myself. But something in her eyes, steady, unflinching, made me answer. A pen, I said. Daniel's. She nodded slowly. As I thought. You knew about it. I knew he was hiding something, she said. I just didn't know where. A chill ran through me. He left a note, I admitted. Her gaze sharpened immediately. What did it say? I swallowed. Don't trust anyone from Langford and Pierce. For the first time, her composure cracked. Just slightly, but enough. Then it's worse than I thought, she murmured. My heart began to pound again. What is, I asked. She looked at me carefully, weighing something, deciding something. Then Daniel wasn't just suspicious, she said quietly. He was gathering evidence. The world seemed to tilt. Evidence of what? Her answer came slowly, like something she had been holding back for far too long. Fraud, she said. Embezzlement. Abuse of client trust funds. Each word landed heavier than the last. And Victor Langford, I asked. Her eyes didn't waver. He's at the center of it. The name echoed in my mind. Victor Langford. The man who had called me. The man who wanted to come to my house. The man whose name sat at the center of Daniel's notes. My throat tightened. Daniel was going to expose him, I said. It wasn't a question. Margaret gave a slow nod. Yes, she said. And that's exactly why I'm afraid he didn't die of natural causes. The air seemed to leave my lungs. I knew it, I whispered, but hearing it out loud made it real, too real. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to steady the trembling inside me. What happens now? I asked. Margaret's gaze softened slightly. That depends on you, she said. On me? You're holding something Daniel trusted no one else with, she replied. That makes you important, or dangerous. I wasn't sure which. And the boy I asked suddenly, Ethan. Margaret's expression shifted. Careful again. You need to stay away from him, she said. Why? Because if they realize he's connected to Daniel... She paused, choosing her words carefully. He won't be safe. A cold fear wrapped around my chest. He's just a child. Yes, she said quietly. And that's exactly why Daniel was trying to protect him. Protect him. The word echoed in my mind, just like the password. Protect. I looked down briefly, my thoughts racing. Everything was connected. The pen, the note, the boy, the firm, Daniel. I lifted my gaze back to Margaret. What did they do? I asked softly. The people Daniel was investigating. What did they do that made him risk everything? Margaret held my gaze, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes that made my blood run cold. Regret. They didn't just steal money, she said. They destroyed lives. I didn't go home right away. Margaret's words followed me like a shadow as I walked back to my car. They didn't just steal money. They destroyed lives. I had spent decades believing Daniel's world was built on rules, contracts, ethics, justice. Now standing in that quiet parking lot, I realized something I had never allowed myself to consider before. The law doesn't protect people. People protect people. And Daniel had been trying to do exactly that. At a cost I was only beginning to understand. I gripped the steering wheel, my reflection faint in the windshield. What do I do now? I whispered. Margaret hadn't told me what to do. She had only told me the truth. And somehow, that felt heavier. I started the engine. This time, I knew exactly where I was going. Langford and Pierce. The building stood exactly as it always had. Tall, polished glass, reflecting a sky that had turned darker since morning. It looked powerful, untouchable, respectable. A place I had walked into proudly beside Daniel for years. Today, it felt different. Cold. I stepped inside. The lobby was quiet, the marble floors echoing each step I took. A receptionist looked up immediately, her professional smile appearing on cue. Mrs. Powell, she said, recognizing me instantly. We weren't expecting you today. Of course not. I won't be long, I replied calmly. I just need to retrieve some of Daniel's personal items. Her smile flickered just slightly. I can call Mr. Langford. That won't be necessary. I interrupted gently. There was a pause. Then she nodded. Of course. His office is just as he left it. Just as he left it. The words settled strangely. I walked toward the elevator, aware of every pair of eyes that subtly followed me. Conversations quieted as I passed. Not obvious, not rude, but noticeable. Too noticeable. They were watching me. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. My reflection stared back at me in the mirrored walls, older than I remembered, stronger than I felt. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the hallway Daniel had walked 1,000 times. Everything was the same. The same muted carpets. The same glass offices. The same quiet, controlled atmosphere. And yet, something had changed. Or maybe I had. I walked straight to Daniel's office. The door was closed. For a moment, I just stood there. Then I pushed it open. The room was exactly as I had left it that morning, except it wasn't. Something felt off, subtle, but wrong. I stepped inside slowly, my eyes scanning every detail. The desk, the shelves, the files. Everything looked untouched. But I had lived with Daniel long enough to know the difference between untouched and carefully arranged. I moved closer to the desk. The legal pad was still there, but it had been shifted slightly. Just a fraction. Enough that most people wouldn't notice. But I did. My heart began to beat faster. Someone had been here. After me. After Daniel died. I turned slowly, my gaze sweeping the room again. "What were you looking for?" I murmured. And more importantly, had they found it? A quiet knock broke the silence. I froze. "Mrs. Powell," a voice called from the doorway. I turned. A young man stood there, mid-30s, nervous energy in his posture. I recognized him vaguely. One of the associates. "Yes," I replied cautiously. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. That alone sent a warning through me. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said quietly. The exact same words Margaret had used. My pulse quickened. "Why does everyone keep saying that?" I asked. He glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. "Because people are paying attention," he said. A cold chill ran through me. "I'm just collecting my husband's things," I said carefully. "That's not what they think," he replied. "Who?" He hesitated. "Then Mr. Langford. And the others. The others." My grip tightened at my side. "What do they think? That you might have something Daniel left behind?" he said. The room seemed to shrink slightly. I kept my expression steady. "And do I asked. His eyes met mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then quietly, "I hope so." That wasn't the answer I expected. Why I pressed. He swallowed. "Because if you don't," he said, "then everything Daniel was trying to prove disappears with him." The weight of that settled deep in my chest. What was he trying to prove? I asked. The man took a step closer, lowering his voice even further. "That the firm has been funneling client trust funds into shell accounts," he said, "for years." The words hit hard, but not as hard as what came next. Daniel found the pattern, he continued. He started tracing it. Names, accounts, transactions. My mind flashed back to the legal pad. The web of notes. Victor Langford at the center. "And Langford?" I asked. The man's expression darkened. "He controls it," he said. "Or at least, he's the one who makes sure it keeps running." My stomach twisted. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He let out a quiet breath. "Because Daniel trusted me," he said. "And because I saw what they did to the last person who tried to speak up." My heart skipped. What happened to them? He didn't answer right away. Then they lost everything, he said simply. Career, reputation, savings, destroyed. Just like Margaret had said. "They make it look legal," he added. "That's the worst part. Everything is buried under layers of paperwork. You'd never see it unless you knew exactly where to look." And Daniel did, I whispered. Yes. Silence filled the room again. Heavy. Charged. Then I remembered something. The day he died, I said slowly, he wasn't at the office. The man nodded. I know. My eyes narrowed. How do you know that? Because he was supposed to meet me, he said. My breath caught. About what? He hesitated. Then he said he had enough evidence, he admitted. Enough to take it outside the firm. Regulators. Maybe even federal investigators. My pulse pounded in my ears. He was going to expose them, I said. Yes. And he died. The words hung in the air between us. Neither of us said it out loud. We didn't have to. Do you think I started? But I couldn't finish the sentence. The man looked at me steadily. I think Daniel knew he was in danger, he said. A slow, cold realization spread through me. And he left something behind, I whispered. His gaze sharpened. That's what they're afraid of, he said. I felt the pen in my coat pocket like it was burning through the fabric. But I said nothing. Not yet. Be careful, Mrs. Powell, he added quietly. If they think you have something, they won't just ask for it. A sudden sound echoed in the hallway. Footsteps, heavy, approaching. The man's expression changed instantly. They're coming, he whispered. My heart jumped. Go, I said quickly. He hesitated for half a second, then slipped out the door. I turned back toward the desk, my mind racing. Footsteps grew louder, closer. And then a shadow appeared under the door, followed by a voice I recognized immediately. Smooth, controlled, dangerous. Charlotte Victor Langford called softly from the other side. I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk. My blood ran cold, because now I knew exactly what kind of man he really was. For a moment, I couldn't move. Victor Langford's voice, smooth, controlled, almost warm, slid through the door like something that didn't belong in the same world as the truth I had just uncovered. Charlotte, he repeated, lightly knocking. May I come in? My mind raced. Margaret's warning, the associate's fear, Daniel's note. Don't trust anyone from Langford and Pierce. And now he was standing right outside the door, waiting. I forced myself to breathe, slowly, carefully. Then I did the only thing I could do. I composed myself and opened the door. Victor Langford stood there impeccably dressed as always. His gray suit was perfectly tailored, his silver hair neat, his expression composed in a way that almost felt comforting if I didn't know better. But I did know better, and that changed everything. Charlotte, he said again, softer this time. I'm so sorry for your loss. His eyes held mine. Search, measuring. I gave him a small nod. Thank you. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. That more than anything told me exactly who he was. He glanced briefly around Daniel's office, then back at me. I wasn't expecting to find you here today, he said. I needed to collect a few things, I replied calmly. Of course, he said, smiling faintly. That's perfectly understandable. Silence stretched for a moment. Then he walked toward Daniel's desk, his fingers brushing lightly across its surface as if he were claiming it. As you can imagine, he continued, Daniel's passing has left quite a gap here at the firm. Something in the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Not grief, not respect. Logistics, a vacancy. I imagine it has, I replied. He turned back to me, studying my face. Have you had time to review his personal affairs yet? He asked. The question sounded casual, but it wasn't. It was careful, targeted. I kept my expression neutral. Not yet, I said. A lie. He nodded slowly, as if weighing that answer. Well, he said, there are certain matters we'll need to address soon. Financial accounts, client responsibilities, legal transitions. His tone was steady, controlled. But underneath it, I could hear something else. Urgency. Too much urgency. I received a call earlier, I said, watching him closely. From someone at the firm. His expression didn't change. Yes, he said. That would have been me arranging things. I was told it needed to be handled quickly. A faint smile touched his lips. In situations like this, delays can create complications. Complications. The word echoed in my mind. Daniel didn't like to rush things, I said quietly. For the first time, something flickered in Victor's eyes. Annoyance. Just for a second. Then it was gone. Daniel had his methods, he replied smoothly. But in business, timing is everything. Business. That was what this was to him. Just business. I took a small step closer. What exactly needs to be handled? Victor, I asked. His gaze sharpened slightly. Primarily documentation, he said. Certain files Daniel was responsible for. Sensitive materials. It's important we ensure everything is accounted for. My heart began to beat faster. Sensitive materials. Files. He was looking for something. Something Daniel had hidden. Of course, I said. That makes sense. Another lie. He watched me carefully. Then, almost casually, did Daniel leave anything unusual behind? He asked. There it was. The question, simple on the surface, but loaded underneath. I felt the pen in my pocket again. Heavy, important, dangerous. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Unusual, I repeated. He nodded. Anything out of place, he clarified. Documents, notes, items he may not have had time to properly file. My mind flashed to the note, to the phone, to the web of names, to everything I had just discovered. No, I said. The word came out steady, even though my pulse was racing. Victor studied me for a long moment, long enough that I wondered if he could hear my heartbeat. Then, he smiled. I see, he said softly. But I didn't believe him. Not for a second. He didn't believe me. Not completely. But he didn't have proof. Not yet. That's good, he continued. It means we can proceed without unnecessary complications. Again that word. Complications. I folded my arms loosely, trying to appear calm. And if there were complications, I asked. His smile didn't fade, but his eyes changed. Slightly. They tend to resolve themselves, he said. A chill ran through me, eventually. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything he had said. I took a breath. Daniel was working late a lot recently, I said, shifting the conversation. Do you know why Victor tilted his head slightly? As I said, he replied. Daniel had his methods. He was thorough. That's not what I meant, I said quietly. His gaze sharpened again. I mean, was he working on something specific? There was a pause, a very deliberate pause. Then nothing out of the ordinary, Victor said. Another lie. I could feel it, just like he could probably feel mine. We stood there, two people smiling politely, while both knowing the truth was something else entirely. Finally, Victor stepped back. Well, he said, straightening his jacket. I won't keep you any longer. Relief flickered briefly in my chest, but it didn't last. "I'll have my assistant contact you to arrange a formal meeting," he added. "We'll go through everything properly then." Properly. Controlled. On his terms. "I'll let you know when I'm ready," I replied. His smile returned. Polite, patient, dangerous. "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need." But the way he said it made one thing very clear. Time wasn't something he intended to give me. He moved toward the door, then paused, one hand resting lightly on the frame. "Charlotte," he said without turning. "Yes, if you do come across anything that seems out of place." He glanced back at me. "I'd appreciate you bringing it directly to me." Our eyes met, and in that moment, the mask slipped. Just enough. What I saw underneath wasn't grief, wasn't concern. It was control and fear. Not fear of losing Daniel, fear of losing something else. Something Daniel had taken from him. "I will," I said. Another lie. He nodded once, then left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. And just like that, the room felt different, heavier, colder. I stood there for a long moment, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. Only when they were completely gone did I finally let myself breathe. My legs felt weak. My hands trembled slightly. But my mind was clearer than it had been all day. Victor Langford wasn't just involved. He was afraid. And that meant one thing. Daniel had found something real, something powerful, something dangerous enough to make a man like Victor nervous. I reached into my coat and pulled out the pen, turning it slowly in my fingers. "This is what you were looking for, isn't it?" I whispered. Not the pen itself, but what it led to, what it protected. I looked back at the desk, at the files, at the life Daniel had lived in this room. And for the first time since his funeral, I didn't feel lost. I felt something else, something stronger. Resolve. "Okay, Daniel," I said quietly. "You trusted me with this." My grip tightened around the pen. "So now, I'm going to find out the truth." I didn't go back to Daniel's house right away. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time, I understood something clearly. Fear was exactly what Victor Langford was counting on. And I wasn't going to give him that. Instead, I drove aimlessly for a while, letting the city blur past me in muted colors. My mind replayed everything: Margaret's warning, the associate's confession, Victor's carefully chosen words. And beneath it all, Daniel, the man I thought I knew, the man I was only beginning to understand. He hadn't just been working late. He had been fighting something bigger than himself, something dangerous enough that he hid it even from me. My hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. But deep down, I already knew the answer. Because telling me would have put me in danger. Because loving me meant protecting me, even from the truth. The realization settled heavily in my chest. But now that truth was mine, and I didn't have the luxury of looking away. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was already beginning to set. The sky burned orange and gold, but the house in front of me still felt cold, unfamiliar, as if it no longer belonged to the life I thought I had. I sat in the car for a moment, watching the windows. Still. Quiet. Too quiet. The same feeling crept back in. That subtle, persistent awareness. Someone could be watching. I checked the rearview mirror. Nothing. The street was empty, but the feeling didn't leave. I stepped out of the car, slowly locking it behind me. Every sound felt amplified, the click of the lock, the crunch of gravel, the faint rustle of leaves. When I reached the front door, I paused, listening. Nothing. Then I opened it. The house greeted me with silence, but not the peaceful kind, the kind that felt disturbed. I stepped inside cautiously. "Hello," I called out. No answer. Of course not. Still, I moved carefully through the living room, my eyes scanning everything. At first glance, nothing seemed wrong. But then I saw it. The picture frame on the mantel. It had been moved, just slightly, barely noticeable, but enough. My heart began to pound. Someone had been here, after I left, after Daniel died. I moved further inside, my steps slower now. The kitchen looked the same, the hallway, the stairs. Until I reached Daniel's office. The door was open, wider than I had left it. A cold wave of dread washed over me. I stepped inside. Everything looked normal. Too normal. The desk was neat, the chair pushed in, the shelves untouched. But I knew better. Just like earlier at the firm, this wasn't untouched. This was cleaned, carefully, deliberately. My stomach tightened. "They came here," I whispered, and this time, they hadn't been subtle about it. I moved quickly to the desk, pulling open drawers. Empty. Not completely, but emptier than they should have been. Files were missing, folders gone. Anything that might have mattered, taken. A sharp panic rose in my chest. No! No, no! I turned, scanning the room again, my breathing quickening. They're ahead of me. Of course they were. Victor had come to the office. He had seen me there. He knew I was looking, and he hadn't wasted time. My hands trembled as I pressed them against the desk. Think clearly. What had they taken? What had they missed? My eyes fell on the bookshelf. Daniel's law books lined the shelves, untouched for years, except for occasional reference. I walked over slowly. Something about it felt off. Not obvious, but wrong. I reached out and ran my fingers along the spines. And then I felt it. A gap. Not a missing book. Something behind them. My breath caught. Carefully, I pulled two of the books forward. Behind them, a small, flat compartment. Hidden. My heart began to race again. Daniel. He had hidden something here. Something even they hadn't found. Not yet. With shaking hands, I reached inside and pulled out a thin envelope. Plain, unmarked, but heavy with meaning. I stared at it for a moment. This was it. This was what they were looking for. What Daniel had died protecting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside documents, copies of bank transfers, account numbers, names, so many names, and at the top of one page, Langford and Pierce Trust Account. My pulse pounded in my ears. "This is it," I whispered. "Proof. Real, undeniable proof." But there was something else. At the bottom of the envelope, a smaller, folded note. I unfolded it slowly and immediately recognized Daniel's handwriting. "Charlotte, if you're then I didn't have time. I'm sorry. I wanted to protect you from this, but I realize now. I may have only made it worse. You need to be careful. They won't trust only the ones who come to you with nothing to gain." And most importantly, protect Ethan. He's the reason I couldn't walk away. Daniel. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. Protect Ethan. The words hit harder than anything else. This wasn't just about money, or corruption, or even Daniel. This was about a child. A child caught in something far too big. A sudden sound snapped me out of it. A faint creak. Behind me. I froze. Slowly, I turned. The hallway outside the office was empty, but the front door? It wasn't fully closed anymore. A thin line of evening light cut through the gap. My heart began to pound again. Had I left it open numb? I was sure I hadn't, which meant someone else had opened it. A cold wave of fear swept through me. They were here, right now. I quickly gathered the documents, sliding them back into the envelope and clutching it tightly. Think. Think. You can't panic. You can't freeze. You have to move. Another faint sound echoed through the house. Closer this time. A footstep. Slow, deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. They weren't hiding anymore. They were coming for it. For me. And in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. This was no longer just Daniel's fight. It was mine now. And if I didn't act fast, I might not get a second chance. I didn't breathe. Not fully. Not properly. I stood there in Daniel's office, clutching the envelope so tightly, the edges pressed into my palm, listening to the sound of someone moving through my house. Another step. Slow. Measured. Not a burglar. Not random. Whoever it was. They knew exactly where they were going. And that made it worse. My heart hammered against my ribs loud enough I was sure they could hear it. Think Charlotte. Panic would get me nowhere. I glanced quickly around the room. No obvious place to hide. No back door. Only one way out through the hallway. Toward them. Another step. Closer now. The floorboard creaked just outside the office. I moved, quietly, instinctively, sliding the envelope inside my coat, pressing it flat against my body. Protect it. Protect Ethan. Daniel's words echoed in my mind. I stepped toward the door slowly, every muscle tense. And then a shadow crossed the hallway. I froze. Someone was right there, just outside. For a split second, I considered calling out, confronting them, but something inside me stopped me. No, this wasn't the moment to be brave. This was the moment to be smart. I took a step back instead, my eyes darting around the room again. Window. There. Partially open. Daniel never opened windows. Not unless he wanted a second exit, of course. Of course he would think ahead. My breath came quicker now, but quieter. I moved toward the window, lifting it slowly, carefully, trying not to make a sound. Another step echoed in the hallway. They were closer. Too close. I swung one leg over the sill, then the other, landing softly on the grass outside. The cool air hit me instantly. I didn't stop. I moved along the side of the house, staying low, keeping to the shadows. My pulse pounded in my ears. Every sound felt amplified, the rustle of leaves, the crunch of gravel under my shoes. Behind me, the front door opened fully. I heard it, clear, deliberate. They were inside now. No more pretending. I didn't look back. Not yet. I reached the edge of the house and crouched slightly, peering around the corner. A man stepped into view through the open front door. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothing. Not Victor, but not random either. He moved with purpose, like someone who had done this before. My stomach tightened. He scanned the room quickly, then moved deeper into the house, straight toward the hallway, toward Daniel's office, toward where I had been just seconds ago. If I had hesitated, if I had stayed, a cold shiver ran through me. I forced myself to move again, slipping quietly toward the back gate. Each step felt like it took too long. Each sound felt too loud. My hand trembled slightly as I reached the latch. Please don't squeak. I eased it open, slowly, carefully. The metal shifted with the faintest sound. I froze, listening. No footsteps behind me. No sudden movement. Nothing. I slipped through and closed it behind me. Then I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands shook as I fumbled for the keys, nearly dropping them before finally unlocking the door. I slid inside, slammed it shut, and locked it immediately. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. Fast, shallow, panicked. They were in my house, I whispered. The words didn't feel real, but they were. Victor hadn't just been asking questions. He had sent someone, already, which meant one thing: they knew I had something, or at least, they suspected it. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. This wasn't just about documents anymore. This was about control, and they were losing it. I glanced down at my coat, at the envelope hidden beneath the fabric. You didn't find it, I murmured. Not yet. A sudden wave of emotion hit me. Fear, yes. But something else too. Anger. Sharp. Burning. They had gone into my home. My home. After my husband's funeral. After everything. And they thought they could scare me into handing it over. My jaw tightened. No, I whispered. You don't get to do that. Not anymore. I started the engine. The car roared to life louder than I expected, but I didn't care. I pulled out of the driveway quickly, my eyes flicking to the house one last time. The front door was still open. The man hadn't come out. Not yet. Good. Let him search. Let him find nothing. Because for once, I was ahead of them. I drove without a clear destination, at first my mind racing faster than the road beneath me. Where could I go? Home was no longer safe. The firm was worse. Margaret? Maybe. But something stopped me. Daniel's words. Trust only the ones who come to you with nothing to gain. Margaret had approached me. Not the other way around. That mattered. But I still didn't know enough. Not yet. Then another thought hit me. Ethan. Protect Ethan. The words settled heavily in my chest. If they were willing to break into my house, if they were willing to follow me, then what would they do if they found out about him? My hands tightened on the wheel again. No, I said firmly. They don't get near him. Not if I could help it. But how I didn't even know where he was, where he lived, who he was with. Except Margaret. She knew. She had to. I reached for my phone, my fingers still unsteady. I didn't have her number. Of course I didn't. Everything had happened too fast. But she had said something. Something important. You need to stay away from him. That wasn't a warning. It was protection. Which meant she was already watching over him. A small, fragile sense of relief flickered in my chest. But it didn't last. Because now I understood the full picture. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It wasn't just about the firm. It was about a child caught in the middle of something far bigger than he could understand. And Daniel had chosen to protect him, at the cost of his own life. My throat tightened. I won't let that be for nothing. I whispered. I reached into my coat and pulled out the envelope, glancing at it briefly before placing it carefully on the passenger seat. Proof, danger, truth, all in one place. And now it was up to me, a 62-year-old widow who had spent most of her life trusting the system, to stand against it. The thought should have terrified me, and it did. But beneath the fear, something stronger was growing. Determination. Because Daniel hadn't just left me evidence. He had left me a choice, and I knew exactly which one I was going to make. I didn't realize how far I had driven until the city lights began to thin and the roads grew quieter. My hands were still tight on the steering wheel, my thoughts moving faster than the passing streetlights. Every turn felt automatic, guided more by instinct than decision. I needed somewhere safe, somewhere they wouldn't think to look. But the truth was, I didn't know where that was anymore. Home was gone. The firm was dangerous, and anyone connected to Daniel's world could be watching. I slowed the car at a red light, my eyes drifting again to the envelope on the passenger seat. It looked so ordinary, so harmless, but inside it was enough to destroy everything Victor Langford had built. And that made it the most dangerous thing I had ever touched. A car pulled up beside me. I froze, just for a second, my heart jumping at something so simple. This was what fear did. It made everything feel like a threat. The light turned green. I drove on. Eventually, I pulled into a small parking lot outside a quiet diner. It wasn't a place Daniel and I used to go, which was exactly why I chose it. I parked near the back, away from the main road, and sat there for a moment, watching, waiting. No cars circling, no one paying attention. Good. I grabbed the envelope and stepped out. The bell above the diner door chimed softly as I entered. Warm light, the smell of coffee, a few scattered customers, an elderly couple, a truck driver, a young waitress wiping down the counter. Normal. So painfully normal it almost made me cry. I slid into a booth near the corner, keeping my back to the wall. Old habits, or maybe new ones forming too quickly. The waitress approached with a small smile. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yes, please." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She nodded and walked away. I exhaled slowly, placing the envelope on the table in front of me. For the first time since leaving the house, I let myself open it properly, carefully, page by page. Each document was more detailed than the last. Transfers, account numbers, dates. Everything lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. Daniel hadn't just suspected something. He had built a case, a real one. And the deeper I looked, the worse it became. Some of the accounts weren't just tied to clients. They were tied to families, trust funds, estates. Money meant to protect people, being siphoned away. My stomach turned. "These aren't just numbers," I whispered. "They're lives." Margaret had been right. They didn't just steal. They destroyed. I flipped another page. And that's when I saw it. A name. Brooks Family Trust. My breath caught. Brooks. Ethan Brooks. My hands trembled slightly as I read further. The account had been flagged. Irregular withdrawals. Unauthorized transfers. A timeline of loss. Slow, careful, systematic. They had been draining it, piece by piece, until there was almost nothing left. A lump formed in my throat. "He's just a child," I whispered, and Daniel had tried to stop it. That's why Ethan had the pen. That's why Daniel had told what to do. That's why my thoughts stopped suddenly. a realization hitting me all at once. Ethan wasn't just connected to the case. He was the reason for it, the center of it. Daniel hadn't chosen this randomly. He had chosen to protect that boy, because no one else would. The waitress returned, setting down a cup of coffee in front of me. "You okay, honey?" she asked gently. I looked up, forcing a small smile. "Yes, just a long day." She nodded, giving me a sympathetic look before walking away. I wrapped my hands around the cup, letting the warmth ground me. Think. What now? I had proof. Real proof. But I wasn't a lawyer. Not like Daniel. I didn't know how to present this, how to use it. And if I went to the wrong person, it would disappear, just like everything else. Daniel had known that. That's why he had hidden it. That's why he had written the note. Trust only the ones who come to you with nothing to gain. I repeated the words silently. Who had nothing to gain, not the firm, not Victor, not even most lawyers, but Henry Wallace. The name surfaced suddenly. Daniel's old friend. He had retired a few years ago, stepped away from the firm before things changed, before Victor took full control. Daniel had trusted him. I remembered that clearly. He's one of the few good ones left, Daniel had said once. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Now it meant everything. I reached for my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and there it was, Henry Wallace. My finger hovered over the screen. This was it. The moment everything changed. If I called him, I stepped into Daniel's world completely. No turning back. No pretending I didn't know. I glanced down at the documents again, at Ethan's name, at the empty trust, at everything that had been taken. And something inside me settled, firm, unshakable. I pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then Charlotte. His voice was older than I remembered, but steady, warm. "Yes," I said softly. "Henry, I need your help." A pause. Then, "What's happened?" I took a breath, everything inside me tightening. "Daniel didn't die the way they said he did," I said. Silence. Heavy. Then, "I was afraid of that," Henry replied quietly. My heart skipped. "You knew I asked. I knew he was in trouble," he said. "I just didn't know how far it had gone. It's worse than we thought." I said, my voice trembling slightly despite myself. "I have something. Documents. Proof." Another pause. Then, "Are you somewhere safe?" he asked. I glanced around the diner. The quiet. The normalcy. "I think so," I said. "That's not good enough," he replied firmly. "You need to be sure." My pulse quickened. "They were in my house," I admitted, looking for it. The silence on the other end deepened. "Then listen to me very carefully," Henry said. His voice had changed, no longer just concerned. Now it was serious, focused. "You cannot go back there tonight." A chill ran through me. "Okay," I said, "and you cannot tell anyone else what you have," he continued. "Not yet. I understand. I'm going to help you," he said. "But we have to do this the right way. Quietly. Carefully." Tears stung my eyes. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel alone. "Thank you," I whispered. "We're not done yet," he replied. "Not even close." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I know." I looked down at the envelope again, at everything Daniel had left behind, at everything that was now in my hands, and I realized something I hadn't fully accepted until this moment. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about finishing what Daniel had started and protecting the one person he couldn't leave behind. Ethan. I didn't hang up right away. Henry stayed on the line, listening to my breathing, as if he could measure my fear through silence. "Charlotte," he said gently, "where exactly are you?" I hesitated. Then I gave him the name of the diner and the street. "Stay there," he said immediately. "Don't move. I'll come to you." My heart skipped. "You don't have to." "I do," he interrupted firmly. "And so do you." The line went quiet for a moment. Then softer. "Daniel trusted you for a reason. Don't second guess that now." My throat tightened. "I won't," I whispered. We hung up shortly after that, and just like that, I wasn't running blindly anymore. I was waiting. Time moved differently after that. Slower, heavier. Every minute stretched longer than it should have. I sat in that booth, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, my eyes drifting constantly to the door. Watching, waiting. Every person who walked in made my heart jump. Every unfamiliar face made my grip tighten. What if they had followed me? What if they already knew? What if no? Stop. Panic wouldn't help. I forced myself to focus on the facts. Victor didn't know exactly what I had. Not yet. If he did, he wouldn't be sending someone to search my house. He would have taken it already. That thought steadied me slightly, just enough to breathe again. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up, and this time I knew. Henry Wallace stood in the doorway, scanning the room before his eyes landed on me. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. But there was something else, too. Something Daniel had once described perfectly. Uncompromising. He walked toward me quickly, sliding into the seat across from me without a word. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two people connected by someone who was no longer here. "I'm sorry," he said finally. The simplicity of it broke something inside me. "Me too," I replied softly. Then I pushed the envelope across the table. "I think this is what he died for." Henry didn't touch it immediately. He just stared at it, as if he already knew what it contained. Then slowly, he opened it, page by page, line by line. His expression didn't change much, but I saw it. The tightening of his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. Recognition, anger, confirmation. When he finally finished, he leaned back in the booth and exhaled slowly. "He actually did it," he murmured. My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" Henry looked at me, his gaze steady. "Daniel always suspected something was wrong," he said. "But this?" He tapped the documents lightly. "This is proof." Relief and fear twisted together in my chest. "So, what do we do?" I asked. Henry didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced around the diner, his eyes sharp, assessing every person, every movement. Then he leaned forward. "We don't go to the firm," he said quietly. "I figured that. We don't go to local authorities either," he continued. "Not yet. Why not?" "Because Langford has influence," Henry replied. "More than you realize. If we move too quickly, this disappears." My stomach tightened. "So we do nothing?" "No," he said firmly. "We do it right." His voice carried the same certainty Daniel used to have when he explained something complicated. And for the first time, I felt like I was listening to someone who knew how to finish this. "We go federal," he continued, But before that, we make copies. Secure copies. Multiple. I nodded slowly. Okay. And Charlotte? He added, his voice lowering even further. Yes, you cannot stay in your house. The words hit hard. I know, I admitted. They've already been there once, he said. They won't hesitate to come back. A chill ran through me. I saw someone, I said quietly. A man. He was inside. Henry's expression darkened. That confirms it, he said. My hands tightened slightly. I don't feel safe anywhere, I admitted. He studied me for a moment. Then, you'll stay somewhere they won't think to look. Where with me? He said simply. I blinked. Henry, I don't want to put you in danger. You're not, he interrupted. I've been expecting this. That caught me off guard. What do you mean? He hesitated, then sighed. Daniel came to me, he admitted. About 2 weeks before he died. My breath caught. He did. Henry nodded. He had found something big, he continued. Something that could bring the entire firm down. A heavy silence settled between us. But he didn't give me the documents, Henry added. He said he wasn't ready yet. I swallowed hard. I was trying to protect you, Henry said gently. The words hit deep. I didn't even know I whispered. He wanted it that way. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I forced them back. This isn't over, I said quietly. No, Henry agreed. It's not. He gathered the documents carefully, placing them back into the envelope. We move carefully, he said. We make copies tonight. Tomorrow, we reach out to the right people. And Ethan, I asked suddenly. Henry paused. What about him? He's involved, I said. His family's trust was one of the accounts. Henry's expression shifted. Concerned. How old is he, 10? Henry exhaled slowly. That complicates things. No, I said firmly. It makes it more important. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. Daniel had chosen to protect that boy. Now, so would I. Do you know where he is? Henry asked. I shook my head. But someone does, I said, and we need to find him before they do. Henry's gaze sharpened. Then we start there, he said. I nodded. For the first time since this began, I had a plan. A real one. But as I reached for my coat, preparing to leave, something caught my eye. Outside the diner window. A car. Parked across the street. Engine running. Lights off. My breath caught. Henry, I said quietly. He followed my gaze, and in that moment, I knew. We weren't as ahead as we thought. They had found us. My breath caught in my throat. The car across the street didn't move, didn't flash its lights, didn't give any obvious signal, but it didn't have to. It was there, watching, waiting. They found us, I whispered. Henry didn't panic. That was the first thing I noticed. He simply leaned back slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the car through the reflection in the diner window. Maybe he said quietly. Maybe I repeated, my voice tightening. Or maybe they're watching the road, he replied calmly. Or someone else. Or nothing at all. I shook my head. No. After everything, that's not a coincidence. Henry didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. Instead, he reached for the coffee cup in front of him and took a slow sip like we had all the time in the world. We don't react, he said under his breath. I blinked. What? We don't rush out. We don't make it obvious. If they are watching you, panic confirms it. His voice was steady, controlled, exactly what I needed, even if every instinct inside me screamed to run. So what do we do? I asked. Henry set the cup down carefully. We leave separately, he said. Different times, different directions. My heart pounded. And the documents. He glanced at the envelope, then back at me. You keep them, he said. That surprised me. Wouldn't it be safer with you? No, he replied immediately. They expect me to be involved. They don't expect you to carry the evidence. That made sense. Too much sense. Charlotte, he added, leaning closer. You're still invisible to them. Not completely, but enough. Invisible. The words settled strangely in my chest. I don't feel invisible, I admitted. I know, he said softly. But right now, it's our advantage. I nodded slowly, trying to absorb it. Finish your coffee, he said. Wait 5 minutes after I leave, then go. Where my place? He replied. I'll text you the address. Don't use GPS. Memorize it. The precision of his instructions made my pulse quicken again. This is really happening, I whispered. Henry's eyes met mine. Yes, he said. It is. He stood up first, calm, unhurried, like a man leaving a casual conversation. Charlotte, he said quietly before stepping away. Yes, you're doing exactly what Daniel hoped you would. My throat tightened. Before I could respond, he was already walking toward the door. The bell chimed softly as he left. I didn't look at the car. Not yet. I forced myself to sit still, to breathe, to act normal. 5 minutes. It felt like an hour. Every second stretched painfully long. I lifted the coffee cup again, even though my hands were slightly unsteady. Sip. Wait. Breathe. Don't look. Don't react. Finally, I stood, slowly, casually. Just another woman leaving a quiet diner at the end of a long day. I walked to the register, paid, and nodded politely to the waitress. Then I stepped outside. The air felt colder now, heavier. I kept my gaze forward, not toward the car, not toward anything suspicious, just the parking lot, just my car. My steps were steady, even though my heart was racing. I reached the driver's door, opened it, and slid inside. Only then, only for a split second, I allowed myself to glance across the street. The car was still there, engine running, lights off, and now I saw movement inside, a silhouette, watching. I looked away immediately, started the engine, and drove. I didn't take the direct route, not even close. I turned left, then right, then circled back through a side street, then onto a main road, watching my mirrors constantly. Every car felt suspicious. Every turn felt like a test. But after 10 minutes, nothing followed. No headlights sticking with me, no sudden changes, just traffic. Normal, ordinary traffic. Still, I didn't relax. Not completely. Not yet. I drove another 15 minutes before finally pulling into a quiet residential area. Tree-lined streets, modest homes, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. My phone buzzed softly. A message from Henry, an address, no extra words. I read it once, twice, then turned the phone face down. Memorize. Don't rely on anything traceable. I found the street a few minutes later. Pulled up in front of a small, unremarkable house. Lights on, curtains drawn. I parked a few houses down, sat there for a moment, watching, waiting. No movement, No signs of anyone else, just stillness. I grabbed the envelope, took a breath, and stepped out. Each step toward the house felt heavier, more real, because this wasn't just about fear anymore. This was about crossing a line. Once I stepped inside, there was no going back. I knocked lightly. The door opened almost immediately. Henry stood there, his expression serious but steady. "Come in," he said. I stepped inside quickly, and he closed the door behind me. Locked it, double-checked it. Only then did he turn back to me. "You weren't followed?" he asked. "I don't think so. That's not the same as knowing," he said. I checked, I added. "Multiple turns, no consistent car." He nodded slightly. "Good." The house was simple, clean, organized, nothing unnecessary. It felt safe. For now. I held out the envelope. "I still can't believe all of this is real," I said quietly. Henry took it, his grip firm. "It is," he said, "and it's about to get more complicated." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" He walked to the kitchen table, laying the documents out carefully. "Because once we move forward," he said, "they won't just watch anymore." A chill ran through me. "They'll act." The words settled heavily in the room. I sat down slowly, my hands clasped together. "Then we move faster," I said. Henry looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something shift in his expression. Respect. "You're stronger than Daniel gave you credit for," he said. A faint, sad smile touched my lips. "He wasn't underestimating me," I replied. "He was protecting me." Henry nodded. "Yes," he said softly. He was. Silence filled the space between us. But it wasn't empty. It was focused, purposeful. "What's the next step?" I asked. Henry gathered the papers into neat stacks. "We make copies," he said. "Secure them in multiple places." And then his gaze met mine. "Then we bring them to people Victor Langford can't control." My heart began to pound again. Not from fear this time, but from something else, something stronger. Hope. Because for the first time since Daniel died, this wasn't just about surviving. It was about winning. That night, we didn't sleep. Not even for a moment. Henry moved with quiet efficiency, like a man who had done this before, though I suspected he never had, not quite like this. He set up his old printer on the kitchen counter, plugged in a laptop that looked like it had been used for years, and began scanning every single page Daniel had left behind. I sat at the table watching, listening, thinking. The soft hum of the scanner filled the room, each page sliding through like a ticking clock, counting down something we couldn't see yet. "How many copies?" I asked. Henry didn't look up. "As many as we can make tonight," he replied. 3 physical sets, 1 digital backup. Then we separate them." "Separate," I repeated. He nodded. "If something happens to one of us, the evidence survives." The words landed heavier than anything he had said so far. "If something happens." I wrapped my arms around myself, the chill settling deeper into my bones. "You really think it's that serious?" I asked quietly. Henry paused. Just for a second. Then he looked at me. "Yes," he said. No hesitation, no doubt, just truth. I swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Okay." The scanner continued its steady rhythm. Page after page, proof after proof. And with each one, the reality became clearer. This wasn't just a firm cutting corners. This was systematic, deliberate, A machine designed to take from people who trusted them most. Families, children, people like Ethan. I closed my eyes briefly, trying to steady the anger rising in my chest. They took everything from them, I said softly. Henry didn't respond right away, but I saw his jaw tighten. Yes, he said eventually, and they've been doing it for a long time. How did no one notice they did? He replied. But noticing and proving are two different things. That made sense. Painfully so. And anyone who got too close, I began, was pushed out, he finished. Or worse. Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't just fear filling the space. It was resolve. By the time the last page was scanned, the clock read 2:17 a.m. I hadn't realized how late it had gotten, or how tired I was. Henry gathered the copies, carefully separating them into 3 neat stacks. One stays here, he said. One goes with you. One goes somewhere neither of us is connected to. Where? He hesitated. Then I have a contact, he said. Someone I trust. I studied his face. You're sure? He met my gaze, as sure as I can be. That wasn't perfect, but it was enough. We move in the morning, he continued. First thing. I nodded. And tonight, you stay here, he said simply. I exhaled slowly. For the first time all day, I allowed myself to sit back, to feel, to process. Daniel's face filled my mind again. The way he had looked that last week. The tension, the silence, the fear he had tried to hide. I should have known, I whispered. Henry looked at me. No, he said gently. You shouldn't have. I shook my head. He tried to tell me, I said. I just didn't listen. Henry leaned against the counter, his expression softening slightly. Charlotte, he said, Daniel didn't want you to know. The words hit differently this time, not as a defense, but as a truth. I wanted to protect you, Henry added. And from what I can see, he was right to be careful. I looked down at my hands, at how much they had changed in just one day. I don't feel protected, I admitted. No, Henry said quietly. But you're not unprepared anymore. That was true. For the first time, I wasn't walking in the dark. I had the truth, and I knew what to do with it. A sudden sound cut through the silence. Sharp, unexpected. A knock. My heart jumped into my throat. Henry froze. We both looked toward the door. Another knock, slower this time, more deliberate. My pulse pounded in my ears. They found us, I whispered. Henry didn't move right away. Instead, he walked quietly to the side of the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peek outside. I held my breath, waiting, watching him. His expression shifted slightly. Not fear, not panic, recognition. It's okay, he said softly. I blinked. What? He turned back to me. It's Margaret. Relief hit so suddenly my knees felt weak. You're sure? He nodded. I know her. He walked to the door and opened it. Margaret Cole stepped inside quickly, her eyes scanning the room before settling on me. You shouldn't have come here, she said immediately. Her tone wasn't harsh, just urgent. Henry closed the door behind her. They were followed, she added. My heart dropped. What I saw, the car, she said, the same one from earlier. My chest tightened. They tracked you from the diner, she continued. Henry's jaw clenched. Did they see you come in? He asked. Margaret shook her head. I don't think so, but they're close. A cold wave of fear swept through me. We were careful, I said. You were careful, she replied. They're just better. The words landed hard. What do we do? I asked. Margaret stepped closer to the table, her eyes moving over the documents. So it's true, she murmured. Yes, Henry said. All of it. She exhaled slowly. Then we don't have much time. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? Margaret looked at me directly. They won't wait anymore, she said. Not now that they know you have something. They already broke into my house, I said. That was a warning, she replied. And this, her expression hardened. This is escalation. The room felt smaller, tighter, more dangerous. I glanced at Henry, then back at Margaret. What about Ethan? I asked suddenly. Her gaze softened slightly. He's safe, she said. For now. The words didn't comfort me. Not really. Where is he? I pressed. Margaret hesitated, then shook her head. The less you know right now, the better. I didn't like that answer. But I understood it. We need to move him, Henry said. Margaret nodded. I already have a plan for that. My chest tightened. This is happening too fast, I said. Margaret looked at me. No, she said quietly. It's been happening for years. Silence filled the room. Heavy, unavoidable. And then I realized something. Something that changed everything. They're not just protecting themselves, I said slowly. They're trying to erase everything Daniel found. Henry nodded. Yes. And if we fail, Margaret finished the thought. They win. I looked at the documents on the table, at everything Daniel had left behind, at everything that now depended on us. And for the first time, the fear didn't feel overwhelming. It felt focused, sharp, clear. Then we don't fail, I said. My voice was steady, stronger than I expected. Henry looked at me. Margaret too. And in that moment, I wasn't just Daniel's wife anymore. I was part of this, fully, completely. No, Henry said quietly. We don't. We moved before sunrise. Not because we wanted to, but because we had to, Margaret insisted. They'll expect you to stay put, she said, already gathering her things as if this were routine. That's exactly why we don't. Henry didn't argue. Neither did I. The house felt smaller now, like the walls themselves understood what was coming. Every creak of the floor, every distant car passing outside, made my pulse spike. We didn't turn on many lights. We didn't speak louder than necessary. We just moved. Quiet. Focused. Purposeful. By 5:12 a.m., the copies were packed. One set, sealed in a plain envelope, hidden inside Henry's old briefcase. Another mine, tucked carefully beneath layers of clothing in a small overnight bag Margaret handed me. You'll need to look like you're just traveling, she said. Traveling. The word felt surreal, as if this were just a trip, as if I weren't carrying something that could destroy powerful people, as if I wasn't being hunted. Where are we going? I asked. Margaret glanced at Henry before answering. Somewhere safe, she said. That's not very specific. It's not supposed to be. I exhaled slowly. Fair enough. We left separately, just like before. Henry first, then Margaret, then me. I waited 10 minutes after they were gone, standing by the window, watching the quiet street. No cars idling. No movement out of place. Still, I didn't trust it. Not anymore. Not when I finally stepped outside, The early morning air felt sharp against my skin. The sky was just beginning to lighten, the first hint of dawn breaking through the darkness. I walked to my car without hesitation. No looking around, no second guessing, just move, get in, drive. The roads were nearly empty. A few early commuters, a delivery truck, nothing unusual. But I checked my mirrors constantly. Every turn, every lane change, every stoplight. Waiting for something to follow. Nothing did. Still, I didn't relax. Not fully. Not yet. Margaret's instructions had been precise. 2 turns off the main road, a long stretch past a wooded area. Then a narrow driveway barely visible unless you were looking for it. I almost missed it, which was probably the point. I turned in slowly, the gravel crunching beneath my tires as trees closed in around me. The house appeared suddenly, small, secluded, hidden, perfect. Margaret's car was already there. So was Henry's. Relief washed over me. I parked beside them and stepped out, my senses still on edge. Margaret opened the door before I even reached it. "Good," she said. "You made it." I nodded, stepping inside quickly. Henry stood near the window, watching the road behind us. "Anyone follow you?" he asked. "No." He held my gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Good." The door closed, locked, checked, double-checked. Only then did the tension in the room shift slightly. Not gone, but contained. The house was simple, sparse, clearly not lived in regularly. A safe house. The realization settled in immediately. "You've done this before," I said, looking at Margaret. She didn't deny it. "Not like this," she replied, "but close enough." Henry turned from the window. "We don't stay long," he said. "Just long enough to make the next move." I set my bag down slowly. "And that is—" Henry glanced at Margaret, then back at me. "We go public," he said. My heart skipped. "Public with the right people," he clarified. "Federal investigators. Financial Crimes Division." The weight of that hit instantly. "This is bigger than just a lawsuit," he continued. "This is criminal." I nodded slowly. "I understand. And once we do that," Margaret added, "there's no going back." I met her gaze. "I know." Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was preparation. Hours passed quickly after that. Phone calls were made. Carefully. Securely. Henry handled most of them, using numbers I didn't recognize, speaking in a tone that made it clear this wasn't his first time navigating something like this. I stayed close, listening, learning, watching, because this was Daniel's world, and now it was mine. By midday, everything was set. "We meet them tomorrow morning," Henry said. Where I asked. "Federal building, downtown." My chest tightened. That felt exposed. "They'll protect us," he added, reading my expression. "I hope so." "They will," he said firmly. I nodded. Trust. That was the hardest part. Trusting anyone again. After everything. A soft knock at the door pulled us all out of our thoughts. We froze instantly. Henry moved first. Quiet. Controlled. He glanced through the side window, then relaxed slightly. "It's her," he said. Margaret opened the door, and Ethan stepped inside. My breath caught. He looked smaller than I remembered. Quieter. But his eyes, they were the same. Too aware. Too understanding for someone his age. "Mrs. Powell," he said softly. I stepped forward instinctively. "Ethan." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he reached into his pocket, and pulled something out, a folded piece of paper. "My mom said to give this to you," he said. My heart skipped. "Your mom," I repeated. He nodded. "She said, Mr. Powell told her you would know what to do." My hands trembled slightly as I took the paper. Another note. Another piece of this story Daniel had left behind. I unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was different. Not Daniel's. A woman's. Neat. Careful. "Thank you for protecting my son. Daniel believed in you. So do I." My throat tightened. I looked down at Ethan, at the child Daniel had risked everything for. "You're safe here," I said gently. He nodded. "I know." The certainty in his voice surprised me. "Mr. Powell told me you were brave," he added. Emotion rose suddenly in my chest. "He said that?" I asked softly. Ethan nodded again. He said, "If anything happened, you would finish it." I closed my eyes briefly, just for a second, trying to steady the wave of feeling that hit me. Daniel had believed in me, even when I didn't know it, even when I wasn't ready. I opened my eyes again, stronger now, clearer. "He was right," I said quietly, and for the first time, I believed it. Because this wasn't just about truth anymore. It wasn't just about justice. It was about finishing what Daniel started and protecting the people he couldn't leave behind, no matter what it took. I didn't expect the letter to break me. After everything that had happened, the fear, the running, the realization that Daniel's death might not have been natural, I thought I had already reached the limit of what I could feel. I was wrong, because when Ethan handed me that second note, something inside me shifted. Not just grief, not just anger. Something deeper, purpose. We gathered around the small kitchen table again. Me, Henry, Margaret, and Ethan sitting quietly beside her. The morning light filtered through the narrow windows, soft and pale, as if the world outside hadn't yet caught up to the weight of what we were carrying. "Let me see that," Henry said gently. I handed him the note. He read it once, then again. His expression tightened slightly before he set it down. "She trusted Daniel," he said quietly. "Enough to put her son's future in his hands." Margaret nodded. "And now she's trusting Charlotte," she added. The words settled over me, heavy, real. I looked at Ethan. He wasn't fidgeting, wasn't nervous. He was watching us, listening, absorbing everything, with a calm that didn't belong to a 10-year-old. "How much do you know?" I asked softly. He hesitated. Then, "Enough," he said. Margaret placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "That's not your burden," she told him. He didn't argue, but I could see it in his eyes. He had already been carrying it, long before we entered the picture. By late morning, everything was ready. The documents were secured, the copies divided. Henry had confirmed the meeting. 10 a.m., he said. "Federal Building, Financial Crimes Division." My heart tightened. "That soon? The longer we wait, the more time they have to react," he replied. He was right. Of course he was. Margaret stood near the window, scanning the road again. "No movement," she said. "But that doesn't mean we're clear." Nothing meant we were clear anymore. That was the truth we all understood. "Ethan goes first," she added. I turned to her. "What do you mean he can't be anywhere near the meeting?" she said. "If this escalates, he becomes a target." My chest tightened instinctively. "I'm not leaving him behind." Margaret met my gaze. "You're not," she said. "You're protecting him." The distinction mattered, even if it didn't make it easier. "I'll take him," she continued. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't look. I hesitated. Everything in me resisted the idea. But Daniel's words echoed again. Protect Ethan. Not keep him close. Not hold on. Protect. I knelt down slightly so I was eye level with him. Ethan, I said gently, I need you to go with Margaret for a little while. He studied my face, searching. Will you come back? He asked. The question hit deeper than I expected. Yes, I said firmly. I promise. He nodded slowly. I trust you, he said. 3 simple words, and yet they carried more weight than anything else in that room. I reached out, squeezing his hand gently. I won't let you down. We left separately again, Margaret and Ethan first. I watched them go from the doorway, my chest tight, as the car disappeared down the narrow road. For a moment, I wanted to run after them, to keep him close, to make sure he was safe with my own eyes. But I didn't, because this was bigger than what I wanted. It was about what needed to be done. Henry stepped beside me. He'll be safe, he said quietly. I nodded. I know. But knowing didn't make it easier. The drive into the city felt different this time. Not frantic, not reactive, focused. Every turn deliberate, every decision clear. We weren't running anymore. We were moving forward. The federal building loomed ahead, tall and solid, its presence commanding in a way Langford and Pierce never had. This wasn't polished power. This was authority. Real authority. Stay close, Henry said as we parked. I nodded. We stepped out together. No rushing, no hesitation, just purpose. Inside, security was tight. Metal detectors, identification checks, controlled access. Everything Daniel would have trusted. And for the first time, I felt a small flicker of something I hadn't felt in days. Safety. Not complete, not guaranteed, but real. We were escorted upstairs to a quiet office. 2 agents were waiting. One older, calm, measured. The other younger, sharper, more intense. Mrs. Powell, the older one, said, standing. I'm Agent Carter. This is Agent Ruiz. I nodded. Thank you for seeing us. Henry stepped forward, introducing himself, laying out the situation briefly, but clearly. Then, he placed the envelope on the table. This is why we're here. Agent Carter opened it. Slowly. Carefully. Page by page. The room went quiet. Completely still. The kind of silence that carries weight. That builds. That changes things. By the time he finished, his expression had shifted. Not shock. Not disbelief. Recognition. This is substantial, he said finally. Agent Ruiz leaned forward. Where did you get this? I met his gaze. My husband, I said. And he's deceased, Ruiz asked. Yes. A pause. Then Carter spoke again. We're going to need a full statement, he said. I understand. And you're aware of the implications, he added. I nodded. Yes. Once this moved forward, everything would change. There would be no quiet resolution, no private settlement. This would be public, legal, irreversible. Carter studied me for a moment, then gave a small nod. You did the right thing, he said. The words landed gently, but they carried more weight than anything else that had been said. Because for the first time, someone outside this circle understood. Understood what Daniel had been trying to do. Understood what we were risking. I exhaled slowly. A breath I didn't realize I had been holding for days. Thank you, I said quietly. As we left the building later that afternoon, the world felt different. Not safer. Not yet. But shifted. Because now we weren't alone. The truth was out. And people with the power to act had it. I looked up at the sky, the light brighter now, clearer than it had been that morning. And for the first time since Daniel's funeral, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. Not because it was over. The news broke 3 days later. Not as a whisper, not as a rumor, but as a shockwave. Senior partners at Langford and Pierce under federal investigation. Allegations of large-scale financial fraud. Client trust accounts compromised over multiple years. I sat in Henry's living room, the television casting a soft glow across the space, watching everything Daniel had uncovered unfold in real time. Victor Langford's face appeared on the screen. Older than I remembered, more strained, surrounded by reporters, no longer in control, no longer untouchable. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not exactly. What I felt was something quieter, something deeper, truth. Finally, being seen. The investigation moved quickly after that, faster than I expected, faster than they expected too, because once the evidence was in the right hands, it couldn't be buried, it couldn't be erased. More names surfaced, more accounts, more victims, and the story grew bigger than any of us had imagined. Henry stayed close through all of it, guiding me, protecting me where he could, making sure every step was careful, deliberate. Margaret checked in regularly, always from different places, always watching, always one step ahead. And Ethan stayed safe. That was the most important part. A week later, I saw him again. Not in hiding, not in fear, but in the quiet backyard of the safe house, sitting on a wooden bench with a small notebook in his hands. He looked up when I approached, and this time, he smiled. Just a little. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I replied softly, sitting beside him. For a moment, we didn't say anything. We didn't have to. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. "Is it over?" he asked finally. I thought about that, about everything that had happened, about everything that was still unfolding. Then I shook my head gently. "Not completely," I said. He nodded, as if he already knew. "But it's going to be okay," I added. That part I believed, because the worst of it was behind us. The truth was out, and the people who had tried to hide it couldn't anymore. Ethan looked down at his notebook, then back at me. "Mr. Powell said you'd fix it," he said. My chest tightened slightly. "I didn't fix it," I said quietly. "He did." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the pen. Daniel's pen. The one that had started everything. I turned it slowly in my fingers before handing it to him. "He trusted you with this first," I said. Ethan hesitated, then took it carefully, like it meant something, because it did. "It's yours now," I added. His eyes widened slightly. "Really?" I nodded. "It helped us find the truth," I said. "Now it's part of your story, too." He looked down at it, holding it tighter. "I'll take care of it," he said. "I know you will." Life didn't go back to what it was before. It couldn't. Some things once revealed change everything, but that didn't mean everything was broken. Some things were rebuilt. Stronger, clearer, more honest. I moved out of the house eventually, not because I was afraid, but because it no longer felt like the place I had lived in. It had belonged to a version of my life that didn't exist anymore. Instead, I found something smaller, simpler, closer to where Ethan and Margaret were staying, closer to the life I was stepping into. Henry remained a constant presence, a steady voice, a reminder that not everyone in Daniel's world had been part of the problem. Some had been waiting for the truth, just like we had. One afternoon, weeks later, I sat alone at my new kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of me, a quiet moment. Finally, the kind I hadn't had in a long time. I looked out the window, watching the light shift across the trees. And for the first time since Daniel's funeral, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I didn't feel lost. I felt grounded, because I understood now. Not just what had happened, but who Daniel really was. He hadn't been distant. He hadn't been secretive for no reason. He had been protecting something, someone. He had been doing the right thing, even when it cost him everything. And in the end, he hadn't left me behind. He had trusted me to carry it forward. I picked up my coffee, taking a slow sip, then set it down again, and allowed myself to smile. Just a little, because the truth had come out, because Ethan was safe, because the people who had caused so much damage were finally being held accountable. And because in the quiet aftermath of everything, I had found something I didn't expect. Strength. Not the kind that comes from never being afraid, but the kind that comes from facing it anyway. From choosing to act, from refusing to look away. Daniel had started something, and together we had finished it. Not perfectly, not without cost, but completely. And that was enough. Bai Hawk and Thung Diep. Sometimes the people we think we know best are carrying battles we never see. Not because they don't trust us, but because they love us enough to protect us from the weight of it. Charlotte's journey is not just about uncovering a hidden truth. It's about stepping into a role she never expected to play. It's about courage that grows slowly, quietly in the face of fear. It's about choosing to do what's right, even when it's dangerous, even when it changes everything. And most importantly, it's about understanding that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a series of small, brave decisions that lead to something bigger. If you were in Charlotte's place, would you have opened the pen? Would you have kept digging when things became dangerous? I'd really like to hear your thoughts. And if this story stayed with you even for a moment, consider subscribing and sharing where you're watching from. You're never as alone as you think.